think I could press it on my end here too, but
It's
I'm just,
recording.
oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. So good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 18th, 2021, and this public meeting of the Hope Community Public Charter School Board is now called to order. We will now call the roll to determine that we have quorum. Susan,
Here.
Carrie,
Here.
Austin,
Here.
Rena,
Here.
Neha,
Here.
Sharifa. Okay, and Altira is not here. All right, well, quorum has been determined and we will now proceed with the business portion of the meeting. So we have an agenda to review. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please.
Sure. I move to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. So one request I'd like to ask, and Carrie and Susan, you're here. Should we move the financial update to the first item so that we can vote on the revised budget?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah, we need to do that before Carrie
Yeah, that will be
needs
helpful.
to leave.
Yeah, my kids have something at school and I don't want to miss it.
Totally understandable.
Mhm.
All right, so in light of, that adjustment, we'll take another motion to second.
This is Karen. I second the minutes
All righty, thank
last month.
you. I would like to ask for the yays, please.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Abstentions. All right, the motion is approved. We also have the minutes before us to review.
I move to approve the minutes. This is Neha.
Thank you, Neha.
Yep, this is Susan. I can second that.
All right, thank you. So the motion has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We have any abstentions or nays? All right, the minutes have been approved. So we're now on the third item of the agenda, actually, and we will have the financial updates first. And I think this is also fair to Dan, so he could have the rest of his evening as well. Thanks.
Yeah, right.
I don't mind hanging out with you all. Hello, everybody. So we're being asked to approve a revised budget for school year 2021. The request was made by the Public Charter School Board because of the difference between our budgeted enrollment and what our actual enrollment is going to be. So before you, we are asking the board to approve a budget that has net income is $655,000 worse than what we initially approved. However, and we'll go into more details as we work through this page, our ending cash as of June 30, 2022 is actually going to be $350,000 higher, in part due to some changes at the end of last fiscal year. So as of the fiscal year that ended June 30, 2021. So I'll start, just kind of run through some of these key highlights really quickly. And if anyone has any questions, wants to ask more, please feel free to chime in. Originally, we were had a budget with enrollment of 375 students. We are now projecting a budget of 280 students. We have in our budget $4.3 million of non-recurring federal revenue, all tied to all of the ESSER funds over the next 3 years. Previously, we were planning to recognize 1.2 million of that in FY22. We're now moving up a $500,000 of that in FY22. And so the net result of that is it's reducing the amount that we'll have available to us in FY23 and FY24, but it's sort of like in the grand scheme over the 3 years, nothing has really changed. We've had a number of staffing changes kind of since school year 2021 is most of the way we were thinking about the world previously. And so when you had initially approved this budget, we talked about the idea of adding 4 reading interventionists, and those are going to be funded by ESSER, as well as introducing some performance-based retention stipends that are also ESSER funded. Those are continuing. We're holding on those. We've had a couple of changes to that original budget that you approved. Is we now have an enrollment coordinator on staff, and then 3 positions that are no longer in the budget due to staff vacancies. So the climate and culture coach position is gone, the school counselor position, and then the media center librarian. One of the big things to note is that with this revised budget, there's no proposing any kind of a staff reduction or a reduction in labor. And then if we go down, non-recurring occupancy expense. So this was something we talked about previously, but just a minor update and a reminder. As a part of closing out the Le Mans lease, we have a one-time expense of $1.2 million. There's a couple of these additional ESSER funded expenses that we're investing into the curriculum. Those were ones you saw previously. We're not making adjustments to that. And so that if we look, I have a table that kind of runs through sort of all of the pluses and minuses of what happened. Like really the reason why we're at the table is the enrollment reduction. And so that was a negative $2.2 million hit. And so then there's a number of these other changes that were talked about that's all getting us to the idea of the total impact to net income of negative 650, and with the total impact to cash is actually being positive 350. So I already mentioned, we're bringing forward some of the ESSER funds that previously were going to be in FY23 and FY24. That's a positive 500,000. There's enrollment driven reductions in the teaching staff of about 7 FTEs. That's another 500K. And again, these are ones where these were kind of staff attrition that we're choosing not to fill. So not kind of this approval of this budget does not mean that there are going to be additional staff cuts after this. The PLA management fee, it's tied to our revenue. And so a little over $100,000 of savings there. I mentioned some of the vacancies that we're going to keep. That's another $100,000. The Le Mans lease was terminated a little earlier than what we had initially thought when we approved the budget. So another $100,000 of savings. And then we reduced how much we're budgeting for contracted SPED instruction. And that's because we have the lower enrollment base. So again, not talking about anything as cuts to the program. It's more reflecting what the reality is now that we're sitting with a program of 280 students as opposed to 375. And then the big one is unrelated to the budget, but important to looking at our ending cash, is that we actually began this fiscal year, July 1, 2021, with almost $1 million more than what we were contemplating when you all initially approved the budget. And that's because a lot of the expenses that we're holding, particularly stuff related to COVID and getting the building ready, did not happen during the FY21 time period. And then also we did the payout of all, or Imagine did the payout of all of the FY21 staff by the end of fiscal year 21. Previously, or like typically how it works is staff get a portion of their pay over the month of July and then half of August. And instead the decision was made to just put it all into June. And so ends up with higher cash balance than what we were initially thinking. So if we're looking at bottom line, we will be showing to the PCSB a net income of negative 1.6 million. But like the big thing to keep in mind is that we have the 1.2 million one-time expense related to the Le Mans termination. And so we're talking about like an ongoing net income of negative 400,000. Cash balance is 3.3 million. That's what we're projecting as of June 30, 2022. So the end of this fiscal year. And the way we like to think of that is like make it equivalent into days of cash. And so it's 114 days of cash, which is well above the 60 plus days range that we look at. So obviously not great that enrollment was missed, but we remain in like overall a strong financial position. And I think the idea behind this budget is not make significant program cuts in order to keep that whole so that we can continue to push forward and build a stronger program. Just as the couple other slides after there in the appendix for anyone that wanted as reference, those were the original, that was the original narrative that you saw back in July. So I just want to include that for anyone that likes to do a kind of comparison back and forth. But I'm happy to answer any questions. Sir Susan is as well. I think Melissa's on the call, so feel free.
Thanks, Dan. Is Dana on the call?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here.
Dana, anything you want to ask Dan above and beyond what you asked and we took a swing at answering via email?
No, I saw the responses. I understand based on the financial restrictions due to enrollment, why we're doing what we're doing. I think that it's important for the school to really consider how they're leveraging the behavior specialists that they are now moving into that support role, because I don't know that that one person is going to be able to support the needs. And I'm just making an assumption because I don't know if it's just that one person, but beyond the financial restrictions, I'm just urging us as a full team to really consider how we're leveraging people to support the needs as it relates to social emotional. You know, across the country, folks are prioritizing that in their budgets. And so it's kind of hard to see that we're cutting it from our budget.
Right. Thanks for that. Melissa, did you want to just add anything?
I was going to say, and I know actually Miss Phalen, as we kind of talked about, and I actually met with the staff and we talked about really maximizing roles. So I can share this as well. Even with that, we've had some people that were in a position, and maybe Miss Phalen can even speak to it a little bit more, how we're having them also maximize roles. Last thing we want to do is let people go. And so we know there's still these needs. And so we do know there are additional people that are supporting behavior within the school. I know Mr. Fennell stepped up into that position when we sadly lost Mr. Sanchez, but I think she could probably speak to that a little, because the last thing we wanted to do was have to let people go. So we have had some additional roles added or adjusted so that we could just maximize what we were doing with the existing staff.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So we did make some internal adjustments, as Ms. Morris mentioned. So originally, for example, Mr. Fennell was hired as a behavior tech, as well as supporting our arts and athletics program. But we made the shift for him to move into the role of Dean in Culture and Climate. Sadly, you know, with the loss of Mr. Sanchez. And then once we realized that we needed a little bit more behavioral support, we actually made another shift where we realized we can make some shifts in SPED with a self-contained, not self-contained, but a dedicated aid position where our former dedicated aid is now our behavior intervention. So we do have 2 people supporting with behavior. And then we also, with not replacing our counselor, we have kind of shifted some of those responsibilities to support from our school social worker, she's a clinical social worker. And so with her licensure, she's able to provide some of those counseling needs that we need for our scholars, in addition to the scholars she already has on her caseload. And so with that being said, those are some of the adjustments that we've made so far. And with the number of students that we have, you know, we didn't want these low numbers, of course, but because our student numbers are lower than what we anticipated, having a clinical social worker does cover our needs for a school counselor. Having both, honestly, with 280 some odd students, I don't want to say we're lucky, but it has worked out because of the numbers for this year. Next year, with the enrollment, you know, that we're pushing for, we may have to revisit that. But for now, we're in a pretty good position.
And to add to that, we had actually expensed for social emotional support in the past, especially at Tolson. I remember having this conversation last year where we made a firm decision, an affirmative decision not to cut staff, but we were over 3 roles then. We had overstaffed that space. And even, Imagine agreed that the staff capacity we had was at the level of a level 5 school, and we're not close to a level 5 school. So if the budget reflects a budget cut, it's actually an adjustment to meet our actual needs, as opposed to over budgeting or overcompensating for hiring people based on nepotism where there were no needs. So based on our current needs, we are actually in a good place. And I don't think we should make the expense of over budgeting, because we actually had over budgeted before. So we have just now adjusted. So where other schools across the country are increasing their budget, it's possibly because they had not over budgeted, so they had to increase. But for us, we're at a good place now. But as Ms. Pella said, next year, we definitely would need to revisit that in anticipation of increasing our enrollment.
Yeah, it's good to know that the school counselor is able to cover all of the needs that are identified on the IEPs. And it's great to know that she can also cover scholars who have been identified at risk. I think when we think with a positive mindset around like what it really means to support social emotional, we're also thinking about what incentives are in place, what experiences can we put in place for students to not just address wellness, but just to accentuate the academic that they're getting. And that too speaks to the social emotional learning piece. So I am glad that we're not over budgeted. I'm definitely not advocating to be over extending ourselves. And it sounds like we are going to be okay for this year. And that's great.
And I could actually assert that I have faith in Ms. Pella, because that's one of her own priorities as an educator. She's been very vocal about that. So that gives me a lot of confidence. Like if she thought this were not a good idea or wouldn't work, I'm sure she would have definitely advocated otherwise.
I agree, Ms. Pella, you've been a very strong leader and we really appreciate having you on the team. And in my role as the board, as a member of the board, I'm just asking important questions just to make sure that we're all making the right decision. This is all with positive intent.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
And just one thing though, Ms. Pell, I'm sure you remember at the last DC Public Charter School leadership meeting, in DC, you can no longer use the word at risk, I think, but I can't remember what the new terminology is.
I don't remember it either, but it's not at risk, but when I figure out what it was, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, we'll share that at the next.
No problem. And with social emotional learning, Ms. Bogle, we also have ordered the full shebang of second step for our students. We've started SEL classes actually as one of our specials. Just to increase, when we saw that need, our kids have been out of school for a long time. So it was really a need for them to just remember, not only, are we pushing reading, writing, and trying to remediate academics, but there's also a gap with, social emotional learning and having that balance between them. So just to make you feel even more comfortable, Ms. Bogle. Those are things that are happening in the building.
I appreciate that, Ms. Paula. Thank you. I have full confidence in the work that you're doing. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for Dan? Or anyone else on the team from a budget perspective?
Oh, no questions for me. Everything looks pretty straightforward.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right, can we have a motion to approve the revised budget? Oh, sorry, I have one question, please. During one of the finance committee meetings, we talked about some students who are being serviced through the special education program, but we probably had not identified them to OSSI in terms of funding.
Is that a question for Dan?
It would be for Dan or Melissa.
And so I know, so I know that we were able to make some adjustments. I did share some information with Dan. We had been working with our special ed department, looking at the specific levels. Is that what you're talking about? I think that's what you're referring to.
I think Dan gave us a deadline to get that information to him. So
yeah,
we can make adjustments.
Yep, sent the information to him, and we will have everything in place and where it needs to be deadline, which I believe is December 1st. Does that sound right, Dan?
It does, yes. And then the revised, so the updated sped numbers based upon internal staff projections have been reflected in this budget.
Okay.
So we were, Melissa, I think, circled up with the team, circled up with Ms. Pellis. So I think we're everyone on the same page of what we think our sped levels will be.
Okay, great, thank you. So, can we have a motion to approve the revised budget?
And this is Karen. I put forward a motion to approve the revised budget.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Thank you. So actually you had to do a roll call for this. All right, so we'll just start with the two board members who made the motion. Carrie?
Here.
Oh, I approve.
I approve, sorry.
Thank you. Dana?
I approve.
Thank you. Susan?
I approve.
Thank you. Austin?
I approve.
Thank you. Neha?
I approve.
Thank you. Sharifa? Valteria? All right, thank you. So and I approve. The revised budget has been approved. Thank you, everyone. Please document the names of the board members who approved the budget on the minutes because it's a part of the requirements to actually acknowledge the board members who voted to approve. All right. Considering that we, talked about enrollment being a driver of the budget, if I may ask, at subsequent meetings, can we also have, I think we should have it today, but just to add as one of the things we'll be reporting on, updates on enrollment in terms of numbers, as well as activities that we are doing around recruitment and retention, and really tracking our results. What are we getting from them? Which ones are most effective and not? So I'd just like to add that as an action item, please, so that we are mindful and intentional and aggressive about our efforts on retention and recruitment. Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have academic updates.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So forgive me, I'm not feeling too well, but I wanted to begin the report with the update on our Reading Advantage and just the Reading Advantage program, which is the LLI with Fontes and Pinnell. And if you can scroll down a little bit in the report, I kind of included what LLI looks like at Hope. So it's in full bloom, which I'm really excited about. Of course, we took some time in the beginning of the year that each interventionist pretty much assessed the independent reading level of every scholar in the building. And even as we get new scholars in, the reading interventionist will assess them as well and input the data. So we do have 4 wonderful interventionists. They're very hardworking interventionists, might I add. They are focusing on tier 2 and tier 3 learners, and that right now they're servicing about 120 scholars. So they're servicing about 120 scholars. So what we did in the schedule, in the academic schedule, that's for kindergarten through 8th, is there are built-in times that interventionists can meet with scholars. So there's like a 60-minute time in either in each academic block. So that could be literacy and math. So there's 30 minutes a whole group, and then 60 minutes of what we call Eagle time. And that's when they come in, they kind of build their schedule, or interventionists build their schedule around that time so they can pull in scholars. They have about 30 minutes with each scholar, or with each group, I should say, and just making sure that they are, as I observe them, kind of providing that instruction with full fidelity to the LLI program. Okay, so if we scroll down a little bit, I wanted to share what that BAS data look like. It's just baseline data, and this occurs 3 times during the year. So if you see at the top table, there's assessment 1, assessment 2, and assessment 3. So that just speaks to the beginning of the year, mid-year, and of course, end of year assessment. So that top table are the expectations for each grade level. And we had some discussions of like digging a little bit deeper, the interventionist and myself. Like if we're looking at a third grader who's on M, and we look at the data, are they really coming at us as a first grader? If you do the date back, that's kind of when they last had in-person instruction. So we had some deep discussions about that and what's going on with the scholars. So I'll give you a moment to kind of look at what the expectations are, and then I'm gonna have, I think, Christina scroll down so we can look at the average. You can go up just a little bit more. Yeah. So you can see here, this is basically where we are. So I do want to point out where it says pre-K, that is myself and the interventionist. There, of course, it works by letter. So like A through, I want to say A through Z. So of course, the higher the letter, if you will, the stronger the reading level. So with pre-K, of course, there were some friends that are below A. So we just labeled them for the sake of data terms as pre-K. So that tells you kind of they're mainly in that preschool letter identification, sound identification. That's kind of where they need a lot of support. And luckily we have a super strong interventionist that's working in that grade level that has that background. So we really lucked out with that. But you can see you kind of compare a little bit where our average is for the beginning of the year and where they should be for the expectations. I don't know if you can, Christine, if you can scroll up or even pan out so we can kind of get a little bit of an idea. Just give you guys a second. Yeah.
Do you need me to pan out more?
Nope, I think that's perfect. I'll give a couple more seconds just so we can get a look at the data because it's a lot.
We have some third graders on like first grade level, it seems. Wow.
Yeah.
And even fifth graders too.
Mhm.
Are the students new to the school, or have they always been at
That we're not sure of. We didn't go that deep because the interventionists are all new to the building. So they because it's just the 5 of us kind of talking, we meet every week. And we took some time after this just to kind of dig into the data and figure out a good attack plan, if you will. So we didn't go that deep. And we just knew in essence, like, we just knew there had to be work to be done, whether they were new to Hope or they had not, they've been to Hope since pre-K or something. We just knew that there was some work to be done because I know Ms. Phalen and I just had this discussion ourselves, but we knew instruction took place during the pandemic, but it could not have been as great as it would have been face-to-face.
right?
So we know there are probably gaps already there, and then it just deepened the gaps. So unfortunately, yeah. So
grade at the minimum, they're at least 2 grades behind at the very minimum.
yeah. So it
Yes,
kind
it's
of
pretty
matches up to what we
amazing.
got. Yeah, kind of matches up to what we predicted, if you will. Mhm. Yeah.
So how is this, right? Like, I've heard the strategy, but really, are you communicating with parents about this to let them know?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. So yes, with the LLI, there's as their intervention begins, and we try to have, this is just me, I try to have like an intervention cycle of 6 weeks. So within that 6 weeks, there's opportunities to progress monitor. But even before that, as we're identifying scholars, the interventionist has to let teachers know who they're working with. So they have this data too. So this is just a smaller portion of the data piece that is available to all the stakeholders in the building. And then there's also a communication that goes out to families that says, hey, we are working with your scholar. Here's the goals. Here's where they are. We're going to support them. And here's a way to get in contact with the interventionist so that they are aware as well. And just to kind of foster that relationship. So yes, that happens all the time. And even as a scholar may test out, because they are moving, which is a beautiful thing, progress is happening, that communication has to take place too.
And are the parents being informed when they test out? Because I think that's also a great success story for parents. And I mean, from a parent standpoint and also from the school standpoint, even for marketing, right? To really have parents see the results and see the progress.
Yes, so what we are in now in that phase, is it's been quite a few weeks, we're in that progress monitoring phase. And I think it's great that as they are working with scholars, like, okay, we're seeing some progress, but it's good to have, as we contact parents, you want to have the data to back up the conversation. So they're in the progress monitoring phase right now, and they're documenting that as well. So that, again, all stakeholders in the building can see the progress. And that's a great way to start that communication and include that in the talks with families. Yeah.
Alexis, when did you say these assessments were administered, assessment 1?
They started in around September, early October.
Got it. So I'm looking at like 3rd and 4th, and as you already noted, we're not where we need them to be. What has Tier 1 instruction looked like? And I'm curious to know what are some of the classroom observation data that you guys are noticing in the trends in terms of needs?
Yep. So right now, the Tier 1 instruction is through SAVIS. So they're doing like 30 minutes of Tier 1 where they're doing a lot of read alouds. And right now, what we have been focusing on are higher end questions. So as we are kind of having observations and a discussion with teachers, is that we have to make sure that we're providing questions or giving prompts to our scholars so that they can kind of dig a little bit deeper with the instruction. And then another piece that supports it that we can say is Tier 1, because every scholar is receiving this instruction, are the close reads, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I know this just seems alarming, but the close reads is just so again, a wonderful skill for scholars to have, that no matter what level they are, they're able to apply that skill to kind of deepen their understanding of the text, and they're not recalling words, but they're more so focusing on comprehension. And that's happening in grades 3 through 8. Whereas K-2, there is a more of a focus on like word studying, if that makes sense. So we're using Orton Gilligan to support that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll listen for your on the close reading. I am curious to know what the planning aspect of it looks like for teachers, because if they're performing at a level D and F, as I think you alluded to, the reading comprehension piece is not there. And I'm also curious to know what writing components are being attached to this, because I don't know if you're using the writing component of the F&P, but for the other assessments that they will be taking, I'm curious to know if teachers are embedding the right questions and then having students respond to those comprehension questions and write their responses to them as well, because that all will go into their overall competency in reading.
Yep, I agree. But yeah, so that goes back to, like we said, that proper questioning. So I know teachers spent some time in one of the PLTs, I used to call them PLCs, spent some time in PLTs and actually going through a passage and looking at DOK and kind of pulling out the higher end questioning and kind of maybe negating other stuff. But I will tell you, honestly, it's not to say Tier 1 shouldn't happen, or I'm not a supporter of Tier 1, but looking at the data, the focus really needs to be on Tier 2 and 3. So that's really where I would say a stronger focus is, and making sure that we have some tools and interventions in place for teachers to provide that support for tier 2 and tier 3 learners, and to make sure we're also challenging those tier 1 learners. So we are looking forward to getting that training coming in. I just finalized that this week and making sure we get those materials in so we can get the ball rolling, because the teachers are ready. They have started guided reading with scholars, but we want to make sure we have the right tools. And I'm glad that PLA has come in with FNP. So the guided reading is coming from Fontes and Pinnell, and for the small group is coming from Fontes and Pinnell. So we should be able to see that instructional overlap, right?
Okay.
And we'll be able to see the kids making progress. So that's a plus.
Okay, can I push you on one thing, Alexis? I
Yeah,
hear
you can push
everything that
me.
you said. So when I say tier 1, I'm thinking about the direct instruction that all students are receiving on a day-to-day basis. And I think I heard you say that the tier 2 and tier 3 is more important to push, but I was thinking the opposite. Like if we get tier 1 instruction right, then we would have less students in tier 2 and tier 3.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to understand a little bit better where you were coming from there.
I guess I'm trying to. What was I guess I'm trying to understand your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I heard you say that tier 2 and tier 3 instruction was more important than tier 1. And I was wondering about that statement.
Not more important, but it's just a stronger focus based on data. It's not to say that it's not important, because tier 1 is a good time for teachers to model those good reading behaviors and prompting and thinking aloud. But when we talk about making progress and moving the scholars, that really is going to happen a lot more in tier 2 and tier 3. When they're doing, I should say, when they're doing small group instruction, because you're still, so it's not to say even in small group, and I want to be clear, they're not just meeting with tier 2 and tier 3. The expectation is that teachers are meeting with all learners so that they're able to move all learners ahead and all learners are challenged.
And I agree with that. My only push is that we're making sure that what they receive in tier 1 is of high quality before we start to look at the data and say, oh, the students need intervention, because it might be that our teachers' instruction or planning is not quite where it needs to be. Is this D an average for 3rd grade, or what does that reflect?
That's an average.
So do we know the actual distribution of data for the percentage of students who scored on grade level versus below grade level?
Yep, they have that. So we know for every child where they are. Where they
Is there
start
a
in the
way?
beginning.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
I'm
I was just wondering, maybe in the future, if we could see that data disaggregated by above grade level, below grade level, and on grade level, because I think it will help to see how many scholars are actually at tier 2 and tier 3 or in need of it versus others.
Gotcha.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Good questions. Melissa, did you want to?
Oh, I apologize. I was just going to mention, Alexis, you really did a fantastic job. So, you know how I think every educational thing we talk about the pyramid we use for almost anything you can think of. But right now, after a pandemic, and I would say our nation as a whole, tier 1 is so important because we got to close the gap. And you're absolutely right. But we're flipped. So where we think of, we would like 80% of scholars to respond and master our tier 1 instruction. We know right now it's more like maybe 20% of our scholars are mastering tier 1 instruction because of just where we have been as a nation with the pandemic and whatnot. So I do agree. It has to be balanced. We have to provide that balanced PD, and we've got to continue to do both. But we just, with the data, we know we just have right now about 80, a very large percent of scholars that are not at grade level. So a lot of our energy is going into that to try to continue to close that gap. But they still need tier 1. You're absolutely right. And we still have to have that as a focus, because also we know that's how we close that gap. If we only teach them, at their level, they won't, there might be things that they can learn and obtain and master that are tier 1, because the gaps are not perfect, right? And so I do agree with you. So I just wanted to kind of mention, right now we're flipped, and that's kind of why a lot of the energy is going into that tier 2 and tier 3, especially with the pandemic. We see that right now across the nation.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I understand completely. I just wanted to pose a question to the group that if 80% of our scholars are not performing on grade level, where do we think the root cause of the issue is? Is it a need for intervention, or is it a need for higher quality instruction?
So I think it's a little bit of both. So
Yeah.
Okay.
pre-pandemic, there's not like there were not pedagogical deficits among our teachers. So I think the good thing about, for example, the coaching cycle, the intentionality between every single indicator and every single moment of every single thing they say, and the professional development and feedback that goes into, each teacher who's a part of, our Phalen-based coaching cycle is kind of addressing some of, I wouldn't even say kind of, it's addressing and giving us direction on where exactly that teacher needs support with pedagogy, so that even though our instruction, we are focusing a lot on tier 2 and tier 3, we have all these interventionists in the building and because of the deficits that are there, but I think it's a good balance between the instruction that we need to provide now, but also at the same time, through the coaching cycle and giving our teachers feedback and PD around the way that they're scoring and performing, that's where the balance is coming in at, so that those teachers who may have already had some deficits in their teaching practices, that's also being addressed while we're making sure that we're hitting and targeting our instruction where the kids need it most. And that honestly, right now, when you look at the data, it's just that intervention, trying to move our kids really quickly in a short period of time so that we can get them closer to grade level as we're building the capacity of our teachers.
Got it. Thank you. One last question. Are the reading interventionists doing co-teaching, or are they doing small group outside of the direct lesson?
No, it's only small group, no co-teaching.
Okay, and are they joining the planning meetings with their grade level team teachers?
They try to, but then we try to intentionally, but it's not going to happen like every time because they're still pulling those groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just pose to the group to consider, as we try to be proactive, because it sounds like that coaching model is really tight and really effective, really consider as a proactive measure to get the reading interventionists in the planning meeting so that they're proactively planning for some of the work that could be done in tier 1. And then also considering, if the schedule allows, to do some co-teaching in the tier 1 lesson so that they could get more bang for their buck in terms of that work. I know you guys are doing a great job. I'm just really trying to push for getting those numbers down and getting them up to where we have more scholars on grade level.
And that's a great thing. I think we're all kind of working towards the same goal.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And I do want to, I'm kind of reminded that even last month that there was a breakdown of grade level that did give those percentages for the entire building for K-8 of where they are, those that were above grade level or on or above grade level, and those that were below grade level. So that was in last month's report.
Okay, that's great. I just want to see it for the assessment data that you're showing today.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
It's in the board packet for last month data.
Do we want to see the, can we go down a little bit? I had a whole other piece. So close reading within its, I should say just close reading. So if you look at the top, the table there shows the school engagement summary. So this is something that I pull kind of to see if the teachers are completing it first before I look at the data in progress. And so that kind of tells you where they are as far as using the close reading assessments with their scholars. And so we've had a lot of discussions, a lot of transparent discussions with teachers in the PLTs about close reading and getting them to understand the connection with close reading, how it's going to better our scholars and even better teachers as professionals. It's another skill that we're learning. It is new to teachers. So we're in a learning curve. I will say that we're in a learning curve. And I'm glad that as we're in a learning curve, PLA has been able to kind of listen to some of the feedback from teachers or from me, and then we're able to kind of adapt and give some I guess, some assistance and some support for teachers to make sure that we're addressing in supporting our scholars. I will say for 8th grade, there was some progress. I was glad to see that. But for week 1, we had 0% of scholars that were able to answer the questions. There's one main idea question, and then there is a question. Dana, you'll be excited to hear where they do have to record their response, just like in the Park assessment, justify their thinking with
Awesome.
textual evidence, right? So they're
Yeah.
doing that they're basically doing this every week to kind of justify what's happening in the text using this skill for close reading. So we saw in week 1, there were 0% of 8th graders. And then we saw in week 8, even though it did go down, there's still some progress in week 6, 7, and 8, right? So we are seeing some progress, but then we are having discussions with teachers about what happened between week 7 and week 8. Where was the discussion? What did the questions look like? Was there something different about the text? So it's very rich text that takes place. So this is for grades 3 through 8 that use the close reading. But for grades K to 2, there's more of that focus on foundational skills. So for grade 1, you can see the table here for the letter sound identification. I know it might be hard to kind of distinguish between the colors, but you can kind of see where the scholars were for grade 1. And then also, if you look to the far right, I don't know why I did it this way, but I had a purpose in my mind, so forgive me. So if you look at grade 1 letter sound identification, you see 60% proficient. That's a great number. If you skip over and go to the third graph, you see grade 2 letter sound identification, same thing. So it's like, boom, okay, our babies have letter sound identification. That's not something we really have to focus on too much for 60%, but that's something we do need to hit again in that small group with those 30 or those 40% learners. But smack dab in the middle, the manipulation of sound, that's where we saw, I guess you would say, a growth point for our K to 2 scholars, or for our grades 1 and 2 scholars, where 36% of those scholars were proficient, whereas 64% were either basic or below basic. So that tells us where the K to 2 learners and the interventionists, where they kind of need to bring in that support piece to move that along. So this is great data to pull. I think teachers are kind of seeing more of a connection between what's happening with comprehension and reading as with what's happening in the common, or I should say common formative assessments. So that's why it brings me to my favorite phrase, which no one has ever heard me say at Hope, which is progress over perfection. That has been a huge learning curve for our teachers. So I always speak about Hope teachers and how amazing they are, because they initially came into close reading and it was just like, the kids are not getting it, they're not getting it, and they're spending a lot of time, too much time. But we had to focus more on progress over perfection, and we want our kids to progress and get better, and not just get it. Like, we have to remember where they're coming from, that they too survived the pandemic or are surviving the pandemic. So if we go down to Edgenuity, this is another intervention piece. So we know that scholars finished the NWEA MAP assessment. We saw that data last month, and now we have launched Edgenuity for scholars. Every scholar has their own individual pathway that is determined by their MAP data. So that is starting, scholars have headsets, they're able to do their learning independently. Again, this happens during Eagle time, while a group may be working with the interventionist and another group is working with the teacher. There's some other scholars getting some more intervention for reading and math from Edgenuity, which is perfect. And we love it. We've seen a lot of progress with other schools with this. So glad to get this started. And again, it's for all learners, so it's going to catch up, keep up, and move scholars ahead. And if we can scroll down, we have some Hope in Motion. We have our wonderful Miss Hamilton, our second grade teacher. She's our only second grade teacher, but just so much energy. And she has such a lovely class. Like, they love to learn and they love learning from her. And that's going to make a difference too. And then we also have to scroll down a little bit more. I was able to come in and observe Miss Burton, and they were doing like this alphabet walk, or I think it was like a season song or something when they marched around the room, loving the kinesthetic learning. And that's a kindergarten class, if you will. And then Miss Nolasco, who is one of the ELL supports. Again, she's supporting those kindergarten learners. in the building as they were doing an Orton Gilligan lesson. So that is amazing. And that's all I have. I think I took enough of your time.
Thanks, Ms. Giles. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is what we've been hoping for at Hope. So thank you. Thanks for this data-driven instruction. And with this, we'll definitely see results. So that's awesome. That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I will try to be a little faster than Alexis, who took up the whole meeting. For our school leader updates, there's just a couple of areas of focus. So if you can scroll down a little bit, Ms. Garrett, thank you. So we, in what we all know in terms of retention, recruitment, both of those lead to enrollment. And so one of the things that myself, as well as our enrollment specialists and enrollment parent engagement task force, one of the things that we are charged with is being very intentional very early. We know enrollment season happens in December. That's the big DC, the DC Armory with all the charter schools that come together. But we want to make sure that enrollment, recruitment, and retention is on the forefront of our minds every day, honestly. So our Q2 through 4 focus will be on retention and enrollment. And one of the things that I always ask our parent engagement task force, as well as all of our task forces, is will this event or activity retain families, and will this event or activity recruit families? And sometimes the answer is no, and then we come back to the drawing board and we have to do a little bit more work because we don't want any of the things that we do in our school. Of course, we want to have fun and we want our students to and parents to enjoy, but we also want to think about the potential of being able to draw in more families. So with that being said, we have some student retention / enrollment goals. There are 3 that you see on the slide. The first one is to increase current enrollment, new families needing to transfer, and that's from pre-K through 3rd grade. So one of the things that was kind of confusing for the team initially is, well, Ms. Pella, the count's over. We already know how much money we're getting, but we have to also look at the potential for families that may become interested this month or next month. We have to give them those opportunities and then retain them so we can keep them in the fall of next year. So this year we actually were able to gain 2 students, one in pre-K 4 and one in kindergarten. They will be starting after Thanksgiving. We did meet with our teachers ahead of time just to give them the heads up, because as a teacher for a long time, it's like, God, I got another kid, but really being able to meet with them and help them understand the rationale behind it. And of course, making sure that we keep it within a threshold of safety around COVID. So we're not going to go and squeeze 30 kids in a class. But if you do have, 14 or 15 students, there may be an increase, and then explaining to them why and how it's connected to our goals for next year, and just making sure that they have the support and connection with the families, the new families, before the students actually join the Hope Tolson family. The next one is engaging existing and new families, and that's through communication, engagement. In that engagement, it can encompass our school leader, weekly communication, things such as muffins with the principal, parent engagement task force, marketing, and aggressive promotion of Parents Nest. So we also have Parents Nest tonight. I was able to go to half of it. We're going to actually change the date so that it doesn't fall. We scheduled it to happen every 3rd Thursday of the month, but we're going to move it to either the 2nd or the 4th just to make sure that it doesn't merge with our monthly board meetings. With that engagement piece, it's just, we have to make sure that we are engaging the families we have, but in that communication and as a part of our enrollment plan for next year, when we make those connections with potential families, that the there's about, I don't know, at least 25 events that we already have planned on being a part of in the district, is making that connection with them, getting their email, their social media information, as well as their phone number, so that when we have additional things happening in the school, that's an opportunity for us to invite them, even if it's inviting them to a Zoom activity that we have with our scholars. Those things are very important, and it's a part of our planning and how we're going to move the numbers in terms of enrollment. The next bullet is building school visibility. We did have a couple of ideas around how to do that. I think we're a little ambitious in trying to complete a business plan for a farmer's market, but I have noticed in Ward 4 with all the new developments, there is not one. If you're familiar with Capitol Hill and some of the, I don't know if they're called Generation X or M, I don't know what they are, but they love farmers markets. And our campus has a lot of space to be able to not only create revenue for our, with vendors, creating revenue for the campus, but also bringing some notoriety to our school and getting people on our campus and being a reflection of hope in that community, the up and coming community in that area. It also would potentially serve as an opportunity for our families. We do have a lot of families who are self-made entrepreneurs. We actually found out about one of them tonight. She has her own towing company business. And we have a lot of families who just aspire for more in their lives. And so in addition to what we are looking forward to with Phalen University as an opportunity for our families, we think that, the Hope campus can also add to that and start to begin providing those opportunities for the community. The next strategy is a retention strategy, and that's parent communication. So we've been very intentional about making sure that we are communicating with our parents through different avenues. So one of them is newsletters. We do a newsletter bi-weekly, a school leader newsletter, but we also do a weekly communication called Thursday Folder. It's not a real folder, it's actually digital, virtual, but parents can look forward to getting information and communication through Parent Square every Thursday. It can vary from reminders, resources for families, snapshots of things that are happening in the school. Today, we actually, Ms. Jenkins posted pictures of all the efforts for our Thanksgiving drive, which we have tons of food to be able to give families in addition to the turkeys that the staff is going to donate for families. So it's just very important that we have that open and constant communication with our families. We also decided in the newsletter to add a food need, clothing need, and parenting support. So in meeting with the school social worker, she kind of was able to give a different lens into how to best support the community that we serve. And so that is an extra addition to our newsletter. With tutoring, we have been able to partner with SYC Tutoring, credit to our school social worker, Ms. Brown, who found the opportunity for us and we decided to move forward. The good thing about it is it coordinates with the parents' work schedule. So it's all virtual and parents can decide and coordinate with the tutors and the coordinators on when tutoring would work best. They're able to identify their subjects that their children are struggling with and set that up based on their personal needs. During the Parents Nest tonight, we actually had a parent who was having a hard time getting on the link, and we were able to provide that information to her so she can get tutoring started for her children. Next, as I mentioned before, Parent Square, that's in our Thursday folder. There's weekly updates, reminders, and then also periodically there's a school leader video. Mrs. Stone, our amazing assistant principal, started a Loom video in which, sometimes parents just don't feel like reading the long newsletters. I'm still working on that. I'm a little wordy. I just want to put everything out there thinking everybody's just going to read it like they have nothing else better to do. But she has introduced that video concept just for those parents who may not feel like reading all that. They can just hear you talk through it. And so that's a part of our retention strategy there. Next, if we go to the next slide, we have, if we scroll down just a smidge, we have our recruitment strategies, and that involves myself, the enrollment coordinator and parent engagement task force, it's a big lift, right? And so just between of course, we have support from Phalen, our marketing team, with Michelle McConico and that whole team, but just in terms of the boots on the ground in the school, it was important that we developed a full team to support our enrollment coordinator. And so we have our parent engagement task force. We have one of our members actually on Parents Nest tonight to give parents some insight from a teacher's perspective on some of the questions that they had and suggestions that they had for the school. With this particular strategy, creating some of our key pushes are to create a school recruitment video and building tour, a parent referral system, preschool daycare through pre-K pathway partnership program, opportunity mapping. So looking at where the opportunities are and being intentional about what we are targeting. Our enrollment specialist has done a very good job of looking at the demographics in DC and also mapping out different events that will cater to the grade levels that we're targeting. And so that's where we have opportunity mapping. Volunteering is another one, as well as enrollment events. And just a few of the enrollment events that we have on our calendar are our preschool play dates, as well as Bring a Friend event. And then lastly, logging prospective family contact information. And as I mentioned earlier, that is when we go out, making sure we're getting that information and being intentional about that constant contact. Next, we'll just quickly review our staff attendance and student attendance. As of November 12th, our staff attendance was 90.1. And as of November 5th, our student attendance was 85.54%. You can scroll down. Just in terms of COVID and building safety, for COVID safety, we have additional OSCE appointed COVID support in the building now. So we have an additional testing nurse. I don't want to call him a testing nurse, but he does contact tracing. And with that, it's just giving us an extra layer of support around our scholars who may be exhibiting some COVID-like symptoms. He has a full tracking system. He monitors and goes through the entire close contact process, as well as contact tracing. We do have a staff vaccination mandate. And with that, 75% of our staff are vaccinated. For those who are not vaccinated, they do have weekly mandatory testing, where now we actually have testing that is happening on site. They submit their self-administered testing or COVID tests on Thursday. Our new operations manager, I created this report before she started with us. So she picks up the test every evening, every Thursday, and takes them down and reports out our staff results so that we make sure we're in compliance with the requirements. For security, just general safety, our security guard does do hourly rounds. That happens internally and externally in the building, as well as supporting with soft lockdown procedures this far. I think this is the last slide, I'm sorry. So just for our November school family engagement events, we have Education Spirit Week, that's this week. So today was 90s Day, and I forgot, and I don't know how I forgot because that's my jam. That's when I was, having fun out there and completely forgot and wore regular work clothes. I'm pretty bummed about that. We have our Q1 assembly, actually was scheduled for November 19th, but we did decide to move it to after Thanksgiving break, just to make sure that our program and our assembly is what we want it to be. And so we felt like our teams need a little bit more time. And then of course, what we're looking forward to is Thanksgiving break that is coming up next week. We have one full day Monday, half day Tuesday, and then we'll be eating lots of food, hopefully, and enjoying our families. Are there any questions for me?
This is exciting. Thanks to you, Ms. Bell and Ms. Giles, for your presentations. It's very exciting to see the progress at the school. And Ms. Giles, I think you did mentioned that the new term is equitable access, right? Not
Right.
okay, so equitable
Mhm.
access. So for the record, now we all know it's equitable access. I just could not remember. Thanks for sharing that. So the night is day and Spirit Week. Are these being captured photos? Are they gonna go on the website?
Yep.
Media?
So they're on Instagram so far.
Oh,
And
great.
it's funny because when you see yourself every day, you think, oh yeah. And you see yourself online, it's like, ooh, I look different than what I thought. But yes, so Ms. Jenkins has partnered with Michelle McConico, our marketing director, and started a big social media push. So she pushes out our photos on social media as well as Parent Square. So if you do have Parent Square access, you can see some of the captures from our Thanksgiving drive that happened today. One of the things that Ms. Jenkins has really been intentional about, she's young and she knows the social media ins and outs, probably a little better than some of us 40 plus. And she wants to give our parents like a live opportunity. I don't know what the term is, but she explained it to me. It sounds like a great idea. Giving our parent, going live is what she calls it, so that parents can see, they can't come in the building, they can't, move freely with the open door policy that they're used to, but we can do that through social media. So one of the things that we're big pushes that we have after Thanksgiving is having all of our parents collect our parents' social media information. There's actually a competition so that our parents, when they're scrolling on Instagram, like we know they do, and TikTok and all of that stuff, we pop up too. And so, making sure that they have access to our social media, and hopefully they'll share with their friends and giving them those live opportunities. So
That's great. When the parents come for drop off and pickup, do they actually come towards the building, or are they primarily outside?
Primarily outside. So if, let's say, a parent comes in for early dismissal, their child has a doctor's appointment, they do come to the front desk. They have temperature check, hand sanitation. They go to the front desk. We call their students down. After school, the children are escorted directly to their parents at 3 entry points in the building, 3 exit points rather. And so that's how we do it. And honestly, even pre-COVID, that a lot of the open door practices needed to change. And had to change because unfortunately, sometimes you run into situations that are out of your control because a parent or a family member may not be in the best space mentally or emotionally, and it can pose a threat to students. And so this will be a practice that goes on and goes forward past COVID. There are more structured ways to allow parents to visit and volunteer, and just the complete, freedom to go about the building freely is something that I don't plan to implement even after the pandemic is gone.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. I was only asking because I've seen a place where they had a whiteboard somewhere central, and you just kind of wrote your social media information on that whiteboard. So maybe we could put it outside by the gate. So as they drop off, they just write their social media with a marker and just write it and head out. So that may be another way to collect that information as well, and kind of make it interactive. So that was what I was asking, but I totally understand the safety aspect. Yeah. Totally agree.
That's a good idea. We're trying to give teachers some competition, like an ice cream party or something for their class, whoever can get the most social media accounts of their parents. But I think some parents aren't going to do that. As long as we can get as much as we can, adding like a little whiteboard or a way to get that information is a good idea.
Cool. And the contact database, would it include asking about the parents' maybe field of work? Since you mentioned, finding out today that a parent owned the truck company or whatnot. So it may be helpful just to find out what parents are doing as you collect their contact information, because they could also be potential partners in different ways.
That's true. And we actually, the parent who shared with us that we had a section where in the meeting where it's called Tell Me Something Good with Shaka Khan. So it's encouraging families to just start off positive. And so, of course, nobody wanted to say anything at first. So I just, my kid's coming back after being quarantined and I miss him. It just starting off positive. And then she shared that she had the trucking company, but then Ms. Jenkins actually offered it was a genius idea. She asked to make sure when she drops her children off to bring her business card, and then we could also promote her business as well as a part of our social media and throughout the school. So building those connections and making sure that our families know that we're also interested in their achievement and what they have to offer, and that they do have a lot to offer. It's just sometimes having an avenue and a method to know what you actually have in your building, and that communication and building relationships. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps even having them come to talk to the 8th graders or the 5th
So
graders.
she actually said something else here. You must be reading her brain, because she also mentioned Career Day that's coming up.
Exactly.
So it would be a good idea to capture what our parents do, because as we're trying to push Career Day and get more opportunities for our students, we have an entrepreneur now. And so I think that would be a good thing to add to our list of contact information from our parents as we meet them as a part of the recruitment strategy. Yeah.
And I know we had some flyers early in the year. Do we still have any left? Perhaps we can distribute them at the apartment buildings around the corner from Tolson.
I think we do. So one of the tasks of the Parent Engagement Task Force is to be a part of that support in terms of going to certain housing developments. We've kind of mapped it out also just in terms of making sure that certain housing developments are, I don't want to say tackled as a team, but tackled as a team, just given the neighborhood that we're in. And so I'm not sure exactly which flyers you're talking about. We do have the one set aside that we'll be using, but I can follow with Kiara and maybe have her share it, and then you'll be able to see if it's the same one.
Okay, and Michelle will be a good resource for that too.
Yeah.
That
It's
flyer.
what she gave us. It's what she worked on. So
Yeah.
if
Now
it's the
that,
same thing, yeah.
Exactly. That did not include before and after care. So if we run out, maybe the next set could include before and after care.
Yep.
And any other thing that, I think data-driven instruction is also a nice point to highlight. So we could include those two, and anything else we feel that, will be crucial or helpful. Now, DC PCSB also mentioned that there are some AmeriCorps Health volunteers available that we could apply for. I think they mentioned it during that same meeting. I mean, if there's a need for it, perhaps we can reach out. But they did mention that as well, if it's something we want to consider.
Maybe possibly with before and after care, maybe if it continues to grow. So right now, our DC Reads volunteers have been instrumental in our program. Our coordinators having that leadership opportunity as they're guiding our DC Reads volunteers. So that can be an extra layer of support, because there are times they are college students. So there are times where they are pulled in other academic directions. So that may be a partnership we consider.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I think that information should be on the slides from that meeting.
Yeah, probably.
Cool. And my last request, and if it's too much for the next board meeting, hopefully by January. So the recruitment plan is awesome, it's robust. If we could potentially make the goals SMART and identify who's responsible for each of those goals, that would be awesome. Not by December, hopefully by January. I know there's a lot going on, but as we enter into the new year, that could be even a way for all of us to hold ourselves accountable. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Yep. And the data, thanks for sharing. Let's continue in the spirit. I mean, from our previous work at the committee level, we did notice some of the root causes where the coaching, the MPD, the teachers said they didn't have enough PD, the coaches, and there was just a disconnect between the conversations with the coaches and the teachers. But I think when there's data to support the conversation, then that really helps to resolve a lot of the issues. So
Absolutely.
that's definitely what we did not have regularly. So
perfect. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I know at Lamont in the past, I have seen data walls. I have seen them at Lamont, I must say. But I didn't really see those at Tolson then. So but-
We do have them up, and
They're
then we're
there.
gonna, yeah,
I mean, not
we
now.
are
I'm just
revi- yeah,
talking
yeah, we have them.
in terms of like root cause, because I remember we talked about root cause from before. So, I mean, those are the root causes. So it's good that we're intentional moving forward. So that's awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, any more questions or comments? And feel free to send us a calendar invite. I mean, I don't know if any of us will be able to, but I think it's just nice for those who may want to join from time to time. So,
Absolutely.
old business, could we check the minutes from last month just to look at the old business, please? Now, we had Rachel on the call earlier. She planned on presenting her leadership program, but she had to hop off for another meeting. So we'll have her come next month. If you choose to meet with her before then, that's fine. I just thought an efficient way to manage all of our time could be to just have them present for about 5 minutes or so at the board meetings. And if there's an opportunity to collaborate, then you can actually have those conversations at the school level. Does that sound like a plan? But if you wish, please feel free to meet with her. I've already met with her one-on-one, and so if that's, she said she'll follow up with the school. So
No, that's Orinthia.
For the STEM program.
Orinthia is the STEM program.
Yeah.
You have a meeting with her already. Rachel is the leadership, the elementary school leadership program person. Yeah. So she's currently at Stella, maybe at Friendship as well, but a couple of schools in DC.
Okay.
So feel free to reach out, and schedule something outside of this time. I was just being mindful of everyone's time when I asked her to join us today, but she had to leave. So yeah.
We can get something set up with her. I know I've got one appointment ready, so we can see what we can do. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks. All right. So we have Christina, do you mind scrolling up, please? Where are the action items? I know they were color coded last month. I'm trying to.
The only action item I had was under operations.
All right, what do we have there?
Actually, Ms. Pella did discuss it. We were looking into the ability to set up COVID testing on site, and so that has started. As she shared, our staff's able to do their testing every Thursday and have the reports back within 1 to 2 days. So that is happening. We also received a grant as far as for students. We have received a grant. We also have procured or found a group from which we can get free testing. So that way, testing kits for students to be able to do the 20% requirement. We recognize that our 20% is a little bit more than what's offered for free. So our hope is that the grant dollars will be able to help us supply some additional kits to have on site for our scholars. So that's where we are. We have talked about 4 different vendors that have the kits, and we found 1 to 2 of them actually that are reasonably priced that will be able to send up for review and approval. But we're moving along great with that. So we definitely have the resources, and we have our testing already underway for our unvaccinated staff members.
Oh, that's great. And what grant is this?
Oh, I forgot the name of it. It was through our development department. They were able to find a grant for us that's about $30,000 for us to use.
That's great. Susan, how does that sound?
I know, it's awesome. We were just discussing it on the finance call earlier, and we Oh, did we do any fundraising development work? So that's awesome.
Yes, thank you. And I got an email this week from someone on your dev team as well, who asked if we know anyone at the Venable Foundation. So board member, the Venable Foundation, if you do know anyone there, please let us know to help make an introduction. They've also applied for grant funds from that organization as well. And planning to apply for another summer program grant through the mayor's office and a couple of others. So we're moving forward, making progress. Awesome. Great. All right. What else do we have on the agenda? New business action items. I think we've pretty much discussed the new business and the action items. Well, we have some more for next month. Open communication, public comments. Anyone here? So we would have had Rachel present at this time, but she had to leave, which is understandable. So we'll see if she could come, if she needs to come next month, but Melissa said she'll follow up with her, so that's fine. All right, so we are really at the end of our meeting for today. We have done well with time. It's almost 7 o'clock, not exactly. So I think we can, if it's okay, go into a closed session just to discuss board membership as we look to increase our board membership. And also Dana has mentioned that she is wrapping up her term. So we also need to talk about how we can expand our board. Alteria has moved out.
Really, because I never heard Dana say that. She must have been saying it really quietly.
Yeah.
Bummer.
I emailed that to Rebecca.
Well, we'll just take that up in closed session.
Yeah. All right. So I recommend that we adjourn this meeting and the board move to closed session pursuant to DC Code Section 2-575B10 to discuss business matters regarding recruiting board membership. Is there any discussion by the board on closing this meeting at this time?
No, it's fine.
No.
All right. Thank you. So I now ask for a vote. Sorry, I have to do a roll call for the closed session because we need to record who we're in the closed session or are going to be in the closed session. So, all right. Can we have a motion to close and then motion to, and someone to second, and then we'll just take the motion and then I'll just ask for a roll call for the closed session.
Sure, this is Susan. I'm sorry, Neha. Go ahead, right ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is Neha. I'm moved to close session. To move to a closed session?
Yeah, move to adjourn and go into a closed session.
I moved to adjourn and go into a closed session.
I second that, Susan.
Thank you. So so I'll just do two different motions. All in favor of closing of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any other?
Aye.
Okay. And then for the roll call, I mean, for the closed session, all those going into the closed session. Susan, I'll start with you. I just go from left to right on my screen.
Yes, I support going into a closed session.
All right. Neha?
I support going to a closed session.
Dana? Dana? Okay, Carrie?
I support going to closed session.
Okay, I think Austin.
I support going to a closed session.
Thank you. So the meeting has been adjourned till next month, everyone. Stay blessed, and we're going to closed session. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
I agree.
Night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.